Welcome back to the Goku Report, and welcome back to a new top 10 list. This time, looking at 10 of my all time favorite movie soundtracks, and I decided to exclude musical soundtracks as that is something for a future list and its own category. So, with that said, this is looking at predominantly films from the 90s to the 2010s. And yes, I will be including soundtracks from like some animated films as well as anime. So, with that said, enjoy the music I chose today. This is the theme for the grid in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. So, with that said, hopefully you enjoy the music. First up, honorable mentions: The Martian. Great film, starring, of course, Matt Damon and directed by Ridley Scott. The soundtrack is great. It has definitely some all-time classic songs on it. Now, on more of the side of things, looking at strictly more composition work and stuff, even though I'm not the biggest fan overall of the film, I can't deny the soundtrack is great. Of course, that's thanks to definitely one of the greatest modern, I would say, movie music composers. Coming at or next up, honorable mention, Man of Steel. Next up, going to Dragon Ball Z Cooler's Revenge, which had, of course, songs from Disturbed and many other new males bands of the time. Also, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of the film, I definitely have to admit the soundtrack is great. Honorable mention also goes to Resident Evil Apocalypse. 4 tracks used by or done by Rammstein, Manson, Rob Zombie, Slipknot, and many others. Also, last honorable mention, a bit more of the more instrumental side of things, for one of the best Miyazaki soundtracks and movies in general, in my opinion. Last honorable mention goes to Princess Mononoke. Now, coming in at number 10, released in 1998, this film. The soundtrack would be done by, at the time, definitely arguably one of the best, I would say, movie companies, at least of the 90s, early 2000s, when it came to soundtracks and stuff, and that being New Line Cinema. Coming at number 10 is a kick-ass soundtrack with so many great techno songs and stuff. Coming at number 10 is the original Blade soundtrack. If you've never really listened to the soundtrack of Blade, I highly recommend checking out. It has some really cool, actually, like Asian artists, I definitely recommend, as well as some also like new metal era music, which of course I like. Coming at number 9. The film and soundtrack was released in 2002, and it is surprisingly a stacked movie soundtrack. Coming at number 9 is the soundtrack to the 2002 first of the Sam Raimi trilogy, Spider-Man soundtrack, which had some really great songs on it. Had a really cool redone version of the original Spider-Man theme by Aerosmith. Also, may I add, had a song on the album by Macy Gray, which is a criminally overlooked and underrated artist, especially of the late 90s, early 2000s. As well as many other artists of the time. Coming at number 8, the soundtrack that is actually really good, especially if you like early pop punk and stuff like that of that time period when the film was released in 2000. And that is the American soundtrack to the film Digimon the Movie. Yes, seriously. If you've never really listened, I highly recommend checking out Digimon the Movie soundtrack. Heck, I even liked the the cover of the song Kids in America by Lynn, or Len, however you want to state their name. Coming at number 7, soundtrack and movie was released in 1997, done by, of course, New Line Cinema. Arguably, this soundtrack is amazing. Even people who hate this movie even admit the soundtrack is great. With remix songs of like Almost Honest from Megadeth. Also, you have songs like from Juno Reactor or Immortals, or you have also songs like Engel from Rammstein and many others. And of course, that is coming at number 7 is Mortal Kombat Annihilation soundtrack. And also, oh yeah, quickly mention another great song on the soundtrack was done by KMFDM. Next, coming at number 6, released in 2004, soundtrack and movie, is arguably one of the best, in my opinion, made second best soundtrack from a Studio Ghibli Miyazaki film of all time. Coming in at number 6 is the soundtrack to Howl's Moving Castle, an incredible soundtrack that I love. Coming in at number 5 is definitely a love letter soundtrack to the fans of the game that the movie was based on. So pretty much all the music is mostly remixes and stuff from the actual original first few Silent Hill games. Coming at number 5 favorite movie soundtrack is Silent Hill, the movie soundtrack, which used quite a few pieces actually not in Silent Hill 1 but in Silent Hill 2, but that's nothing bad. Silent Hill 2 is a masterpiece. But the film was released in 2006 as soundtrack. But seriously, if you've never listened to the Silent Hill movie soundtrack, do yourself a favor and check it out. Coming in at number 4 is a somewhat, I feel, overlooked soundtrack, though it is incredible, and arguably I love the film as well. Coming at number 4 for me of movie soundtracks is released in 2007, the third of the original trilogy of films. Coming at number 4 is Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And seriously, if you've not really listened to the soundtrack, listen to that amazing soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. You will be amazed at how good many of the different composition pieces and works by Hans Zimmer is. Though he is a great master at music and stuff, I think he is arguably now one of the top names when it comes to movie soundtracks of composition work. Coming in at number 3, admittedly biased because of Guardians of the Galaxy. I love the soundtrack to death, to the point recently picked up on vinyl the Awesome Mix, the deluxe vinyl edition, which also includes in total 2 vinyl records. First one is the regular music from the soundtrack, and then the other is the composition pieces, the orchestra music. Coming in at number 2 is arguably, in my opinion, the best anime movie soundtrack of all time. Personal opinion, and that is Spirited Away, which I can honestly say is one of the few anime movie soundtracks I actually own physical on CD, along with also Spirited Away. But with that said, coming in at number 1, I have the soundtrack digitally. I also have the soundtrack on CD, and now I've recently picked it up on vinyl. Coming in at number 1, there's the reason why I chose grid music in the background for this video. Coming at number 1 favorite movie soundtrack is Tron Legacy. This soundtrack is a masterpiece in my personal opinion. Everybody has their own opinion, arguably, though keep in mind I've been a somewhat fan of Daft Punk off and on for quite a few years, going back to probably around 2003 or 2004 time frame. But Tron Legacy soundtrack is on a whole nother level. The music is amazing. I think even the music they composed for Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance was great music, very loyal to the work by Daft Punk. But with that said, yes, Tron Legacy soundtrack is easily one of my favorite movie soundtracks ever. That's the reason I went out of my way to get it on vinyl, and I have it in basically all forms available. That's how much I love this soundtrack and the movie. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Stay safe. See you again here on the Goku Report.